Intelligence Daily Energy Markets podcast on Tuesday, the 19th of November. Brent crude, as we're sitting here, is at 73.50, up about 2.5% over the past 5 days or so. But it still seems to be stuck in the 70 to 75 rut. We'll ask why later. We will discuss why that is later. But first, let me introduce my guest this morning. Welcome to Gulmira Razaeva, founder and managing director of Eurasia Analytics. She is in Baku in Azerbaijan, though she is normally based in London. Ram Narayan, director and vice president for strategic markets and business development at the Vedanta Group in Mumbai, India. And Jose Chalhub, analyst at Jose Parejo Associates, who's based in Caracas in Venezuela. So good morning, everybody. We've got a real global spread today. But I want to go first to Gulmira, who is at the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. Gulmira, welcome. I'm off to Baku tomorrow for the final few cliff-hanging days of COP29, but I've been following it closely, remotely, and it strikes me as something of a mixed COP so far, at least. There have been some high-profile no-shows and some pull-outs. France and Argentina pulled out some of their presence there for different reasons. People I've talked to in Baku say that the mood turned quite sour after the opening address from the Azerbaijan president, Ilham Aliyev, where he was quite confrontational, accusing France and Holland and other Europeans of neo-colonialism and hypocrisy. Some thought that's not the way you should go to COP29, which is usually all sweetness and light and brotherly love, isn't it? On the other hand, there have been some signs of realism, pragmatism, and progress on the main element of the conference, the thing that it was billed as a COP for finance. So give me your take from there on the ground. If you'll excuse the pun, is it a COP half full or a COP half empty? Tell me what it's like there.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. I'm here at COP, and it's been very hectic first week, and we are in the second week already. And actually, it's very crowded here. So we have quite good turnout. 7,000 people have registered for this COP. And you can see it, you can feel it. It's extremely very, very crowded, but very busy. People are just rushing from one meeting to another meeting. Meeting rooms are always full. Always some sessions are going on, discussions, etc. So it's been a very busy week, and I think it's going to be the same this week as well. On your questions, regarding the president's speech on the opening ceremony, I think this island states that also Azerbaijan supports both in terms of their climate change adaptation and also politically. They are very vulnerable as countries, and they're already facing the climate actions in their countries. So adaptation issues are extremely important for these countries. But being colonized by countries like France, but also a president mentioned Netherlands as well. So it's also that I think deteriorate their vulnerability to climate actions. That was mentioned. The reasons were already mentioned is because of some nuclear weapons tests and some other things that are happening in those islands. So I think also there's some political reasons behind this speech, because the political relations between Azerbaijan and France. France has been supporting separatism in Azerbaijan, has been supporting for all these years occupation of 20% of Azerbaijani territory. So I think this was simply an answer. Been first time of this very harsh answer, but it happened at COP. Yes. So we've seen it at COP. So
do you think Gulmira, was he right to go off on such a confrontational notes from the very beginning.
Well, I think in the beginning you mean the beginning of the COP,
Yes,
or the speech?
when he opened the COP with his speech that was taken badly in some places, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he wanted simply to draw attention to the countries which suffer from colonialism, and also within the non-alignment movement. He's been doing this also. Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
within
of
the
course. Yes,
non-alignment movement.
it goes back to the non-aligned movement, doesn't it? Tell me, have the absences that I mentioned, have they been noticed? You know, there was no American president there. There was no Chinese president there. Have those been noticed?
Yeah, presidents are absent, but we have a very big delegation from China, the US, also a lot of people from France itself, civil societies are here, NGOs, experts, and then heads of banks, multilateral development banks, and we had I think it was yesterday we had the discussions which we had many heads of funds, US funds, including Rockefeller funds, who were quite positive in their speeches, in terms of committing some financing funding to climate change funds. So
okay.
Yes, they are absent, but still.
Finance is the big thing, isn't it, of this COP? I know that the Azerbaijan authorities have put great store in their ability to reach a deal on finance, which has been a sticking point for years and years at COPs. Tell me, what's your assessment? How much are they hoping to get? Will they have a chance of getting it, and where will it come from?
Well, given the discussions of the first few days, I think we still had quite positive developments in terms of, first of all, creating a Baku Finance Action Fund, which, I mean, that was initiated by, again, Azerbaijan, by the presidency, and that was created for oil producing and exporting countries as a shareholder, with the total fund of 1 billion per year, and those countries, 10 of this hydrocarbon producing countries will contribute to this fund every year. So I think this is quite positive development, and fund will be operational from first round of contributions. And then another positive thing is Article 6.4 carbon market. So in the first 2 days, the consensus was reached on carbon market, which will save $240 billion every year for deployment of clean tech, etc. So that's also, I think, good development. But on financing a loss and damage fund and others, as still discussions are ongoing. Well, that's tough discussions, but I think we should wait until the end of the COP.
Sure. Some analysts put the need at $1 trillion per year for the rest of this decade, which seems a huge amount. I wonder if they'll be able to reach that. But let me go to Ram Narayanan. Tell me, Ram, how does the COP in Baku look from an Indian perspective? You're a big consumer of oil, gas, and coal, and at COP28 in Dubai last year, where India was a signatory to the final communique, that pledged to scale down hydrocarbon usage and to go increasingly for renewables, a tripling of renewable capacity. But how does this fit in with the explosive economic growth that India is enjoying?
Yep. See, India will continue to grow at 6.5–7%. So that has been there for the last 2 to 3 years, more than that actually. But as a part of the growth phase, India has also made a roadmap to adopt more renewables, especially in the field of solar energy. So therefore, right now about 25% comes from renewables, and there's a plan to increase it to around something close to 40% in the next 10 years or so. So irrespective of what the eyeballs which we see in COP29, and despite the fact there have been some news saying that Prime Minister Modi is now in Brazil rather than attending COP29, but India's roadmap and path towards decarbonization is on. So the Indian government's net carbon targets are still on, irrespective of the fact that what has happened globally in terms of COP29 and what's the background of the US elections also. So, but as a part of this entire growth story, as was the energy mix, one of the things that India is certainly going to play on is increase the usage of gas, which has got a lesser carbon footprint, as well as reduce the consumption of coal. So as a part of this entire roadmap, right now, coal, gas, and all will have a big mix as a part of the energy mix. Usage of renewables is increasing. The focus on renewables is also there. There is no let back on that. And gas is seen as a sort of a critical fuel rather than a transition fuel. So the amount of gas stations and the gas plants that have been built across the country is an indication of that. So putting all this together, India's position does not change. Net carbon reduction, moving more towards renewables, lessen the usage of coal, and then keep the growth story on, because we have a huge population. India still needs to grow at 7 to 8% to keep, to be amongst the world's top countries. So therefore, I don't think there's any change in India's net position with whatever is happening in COP29 and what's happening geopolitically right now.
Okay. Jose Chalhoub, I don't see much reference to a Venezuelan presence in Baku, but I notice you do have a new Minister for Eco-Socialism, which is an interesting concept, replacing the old Environment Minister. But tell me, how does the climate change issue look from South America? Because Argentina and Brazil have certainly been on people's minds. Argentina for pulling out, and Brazil because it's hosting the next COP30 next year. How does it look from Caracas? You're muted, Jose.
Okay, right. Okay, now. Okay, thank you. Well, sadly, Venezuela is a world apart from all this process of energy transition. We don't have right now any type of emissions, reduction deadlines or any stuff like that. I mean, we haven't sent any delegations, as I was telling you previously, since the last COP in Marrakesh, Morocco. I mean, the strict focus of the government recently has been on recovering our oil and gas industries. I mean, there hasn't been any advances on any laws of renewables or regulating the renewable sector, even though there are laws and under study in the National Assembly. I mean, and considering also that we have large deposits of different minerals, for example, like copper, gold, in the southern part of the country, but sadly, I mean, we just don't count Venezuela to be part of this transition just yet. I mean, because the sole focus right now of the government is to ramp up production of our still stagnant oil and gas sector. And from these countries that you were mentioning, like Brazil or Argentina or the rest of the continent, I see that the most advanced countries in the region in terms of this energy transition are countries like have been advancing in their developments of this field, like Chile, for example. Chile has been one of the most advanced countries in the development, and they're kind of designing policies in this field. Also, Uruguay is another country advancing in this field. But personally, I think that the recent position of Argentina in sliding away from the COP by the current government of Javier Milei in the country is purely ideological. That's my personal view. And because Argentina also right now has a massive project of trying to ramp up production in the shale gas patch of the Vaca Muerta, the dead cow.
Right. Yes.
It's massive, and it's pretty much interesting because Javier Milei was visiting the whole area recently.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
So they're in some ways they're following the example of Donald Trump, and they are denying climate change, which brings me to I want to stay with you, Jose, to look at to begin looking at some of the fallout from the election of Donald Trump last 2 weeks ago now. 2 weeks ago, I'm still being treated for Trump derangement syndrome. But tell me, how did it go down in Venezuela? Which enjoys good relations with both Russia and Iran, and trading relationships with them. How will the government of Nicolas Maduro react to the new, volatile, unpredictable White House?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, personally, I turn skeptical about all this because there's again a renewed weight of optimism in the population, the population opposing the government, in a new government of Donald Trump, and in the belief that he will do things right this time, and not falling into the trap of following the same old policies. This whole thing about all options are on the table, that he, managed during his previous government regarding Venezuela, considering his recent nominations for example, the Secretary of State, as Marco Rubio, this Cuban-American senator from the Florida state, a fierce anti-Bolivarian revolution, a fierce anti-Cuban revolution politician who, people in Venezuela, only for that nomination, recovered the optimism and the high expectations in this Donald Trump administration, renewed or potentially reloaded Donald Trump administration regarding Venezuela. And for that, I mean, the reactions in the government have been kind of like cautious. We saw Nicolas Maduro congratulating Donald Trump, stressing that he hoped for a reset of relations with Donald Trump, and preparing for that, because in the last couple of weeks, Venezuela has been holding 2 different joint commissions with Russia and with Iran. And
Okay,
also,
what have they been discussing?
I mean, these commissions are held annually. It's become usual between both governments, one in Venezuela and one in both different capitals of those respective countries, like in Moscow and in Tehran. I mean, ever since Chavez arrived, and ever since he strengthened relations with both Moscow and Tehran, I mean, in these commissions, they review all the different agreements that both governments have signed during the last 20 years or so, in the different fields like oil, housing, energy, defense, finance, culture, technological, and all the rest of the fields that both governments have strengthened cooperations. And both commissions have been held in Caracas this year. And that's a sign that Caracas is preparing to seek a further shelter in the case of renewed sanctions by this new Donald Trump administration.
Right, but it's allying itself with 2 countries with whom Donald Trump is going to have a pretty tricky relationship, I guess. So let's see how that goes. Ram, you might expect Trump and Prime Minister Modi to get on quite well. They're 2 strong men, after all. What's the reaction in India to Trump's re-election? I'm thinking specifically of the threat, more of a threat, I guess, more a promise than a threat, of trade tariffs around the world, especially on China. What does India think of that?
Yeah, okay. On the lighter side, yes, there is two different reactions because Kamala Harris is of Indian descent, so therefore there are many people who are rooting for her, and of course Trump. After he won, Trump is projected to have very good relations with the present Indian government. But nevertheless, Frank, the Indian reaction has been pretty positive. Prime Minister Modi was one of the first leaders to congratulate Trump. I think he was the 3rd leader to call Trump. That's what the newspapers say. And the Indian stock markets, which have been falling for the last close to a month, in fact, for 2-3 days after the election results, has actually went up. So the market reaction has been pretty positive in India. Now, looking at it, what's going to happen the next, let's say, 3 or 4 years? India is very strategically positioned from a geopolitical point of view for USA as from a business perspective. India started to be as a counterbalance in the in the Asian continent. Plus, India-US business has been growing in quite a large way. So, despite the fact there are going to be some tariffs on the Indian exports, but I'm sure there are many other ways to look around it. Secondly, India is in a sweet spot geopolitically right now, thanks to the good relations with Russia also, because we buy quite a lot of oil from them,
Right.
and as well as good business relations with USA. So therefore, net, irrespective of the fact whether it's going to be Democrats or it's going to be Republicans, I think India as a strategic country to do business, also from a geopolitics point of view, is very important for any dispensation. So therefore, I don't think there's much of a degree of difference between both the sides. But yes, given
Okay.
the fact it's projected that Prime Minister Modi and Trump have had very good relations in the past, also during Trump's first one. So therefore, I think the reaction has been more positive in India after the election results.
Okay. I guess you could see a scenario where India stands to gain from increased tariffs on Chinese trade anyway, can't
Oh
you?
yes, certainly. In fact, that's a point which I failed to address, Frank. Actually, there are in the Indian business community there is a lot of optimism right now because mainly because many businesses, many trade can move away from China. So therefore, a lot of optimism in the Indian business community after the election results because of the tariffs on China and China plus one strategy, which many companies have been adopting after COVID. It might get a big boost right now. But net, I would say it's been very, very positive reaction in India after the election results.
Okay. Gulmira, what's the view from Eastern Europe and Central Asia? Azerbaijan in particular walks, quite a tightrope in East-West relations with long-standing historical relationships with Russia and Iran, doesn't it? How will the election of Trump change that? And Ukraine has to come into the picture here as well. What's your view?
Well, I think with election of Trump, the US will have less, at least lesser attention to this region than it was during the Biden administration tenure. Russia is in this region, is in the region. Iran is a part of the region, as well as Turkey and the Caucasus, Central Asia states. So obviously, Iran, Turkey, and Russia, they are pretty much actively involved in geopolitics in this region. Unfortunately, the previous administration policy towards the region was not, I wouldn't call it quite rational or pragmatic. It was one-sided, supporting one side, putting pressure on the another side, on various international fora, including the UN and UN Security Council, etc. So it didn't yield any tangible or positive results for the US. As a result of this policy of Biden administration. So I think the capitals here in Central Asia and Caucasus, South Caucasus, there is a hope that the Trump policy would be completely different, or at least they will not intervene in the internal politics of the region as did Biden administration. But there is a belief that it's not that important for Trump, this region as it was important for the Biden administration. So there is a belief that there would be less attention to this region, we need to solve our problems on our own.
Sure. I wonder if Donald Trump could point to Azerbaijan on a map. Let's talk about the oil price because we're kind of stuck in a band of 70 to 75 and nothing can seem to get it out of that. In fact, many analysts see the risks as being on the downside, that it could drop further, don't they? OPEC Plus has already postponed bringing more barrels back on the market, as it said it was going to do in December, and it's now deciding whether or not to do that in January. Ram, let me ask you first. How do you see their options? Does forecast demand justify any additional supply at all? And if not, what are the OPEC Plus options now?
In fact, if you look at the latest oil demand estimates for 2024 versus 2025, it's been on the lower side. It's thanks mainly to a lower demand forecast in China. So therefore, frankly, I see if you look from an oil demand perspective, like with China demand being lackluster, not as much as what was expected earlier. So therefore, I don't see any major positives on the demand side. So that's from demand side. And from a supply perspective, like especially if with the latest US elections and all, there's some more oil is being pumped out of USA. So therefore, supplies will increase. And the only thing on the other side can be what will happen to the supplies from Iran, thanks to Trump's views on Iran. So net, if I look at it, I think oil looks to be more on an oversupplied scenario. And the second thing that if at all it happens is if at all we see some sort of a settlement in the Russia-Ukraine war and some sort of settlement even the Israel-Middle East conflict, in fact, we'll see more of oil supplies flowing into the market. So if I put all this together from a supply perspective, demand perspective, and from a geopolitical thing, I think oil looks to be more an oversupplied scenario right now. So therefore, in my view, oil looks to be more on the downside right now. So therefore,
Yeah.
on the downside, so therefore, OPEC Plus has got very limited options right now. So maybe I wouldn't be surprised if at all they decide to defer the supply increases. Because given the fact today, countries like Saudi Arabia, they are sort of reconciled to the fact that they won't reach $100 per barrel to manage the budgets. So maybe they'll be happy at around 80 or so, but it will be quite difficult to manage. So therefore, if you ask me, I think on the short term as well slightly medium term, so probably I think oil will struggle to cross 75. So maybe the same range or somewhat lower. That's my view on the oil side.
So we're stuck there. Jose, Venezuela could be a big factor in this if it ever got out from US sanctions and if it got its oil industry back up and running. But tell me, what's the outlook for that? You touched on it before. But if there was some kind of miracle and a resumption of normal relations with the USA, how quickly could Venezuela resume and increase full oil production?
Yeah, that's an interesting question and a tricky one as well. Well, yeah, I mean, if there's the scenario of a full reestablishment of diplomatic and commercial relationship between Venezuela and the U.S., and in the potential scenario of many U.S. oil companies returning to Venezuela to turn into fresh new investments in joint ventures with PDVSA, unlike the one that it's unfolding with Chevron, which has been the sole responsible for the recovery of Venezuela's PDVSA oil production in the last months, ever since the Biden administration lifted sanctions. I think that Venezuela could be able to reach the milestone for the first time ever of the 1 million barrels per day, which has been the target of the government for the last couple of years, and which has been impossible, But definitely, Venezuela could reach by next year maybe 1.2, 1.5 millions of barrels per day if that scenario comes into fruition, and if the next Trump administration comes into a full establishment of relations with Venezuela.
I guess those are big ifs, aren't they? Could we pull up the question, please, the poll question today? This is relating to COP again. Some leading figures in the UN climate change apparatus declared earlier this week that the current COP format was not fit for purpose. Really leading figures within the UN, including Ban Ki-moon, former General Secretary. So the question is, do you agree with these UN experts' summary and that COP should be scrapped altogether, not fit for purpose? Do you disagree because the threat from climate change is too serious? Or your third option, do you want to look for a radically different format to the current big annual COP extravaganza? So if you could vote for one of those, please. And then I want to give we'll come back to the findings on that, but I want to give the last word on oil markets to Gulmira. Where are oil prices going? And specifically for you, what do you think of the dynamics at the top of OPEC Plus, where basically Saudi Arabia and Russia are calling the shots? is this relationship endangered in a market of falling output and prices? What do you think?
Well, I think as always, it's going to be managed by OPEC and OPEC Plus, and there are some few countries that are leading the decision making there. So I think they will keep the prices under control anyway. And if they decided to produce more, to keep a little bit raise the oil prices, then this might be compensated in later months or even next years, as it's been done so far till now. So I don't think that the alignment of Russia and Iran would at least on the oil prices would tremendously affect the prices, and it will change in the next few months.
Right. Okay. Can we get the survey result, please? All right. Okay. We have a room which is inclining towards the threat for climate change, and we want to continue with these huge COPs. That's quite interesting. I thought from a group of oil people that it would be rather more skeptical, but there we are. We're all very altruistic and we want to save the world, so that's great. I will be able to sample COP tomorrow in Baku, where I hope to meet you, Gulmira. Thank you very much for being on the show today. Ram, Jose, both of you too, thank you for joining me today. It's been great, fascinating conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.